I was the Alpha King chef, until he found out the baby I hid was his. The evening sky was deep purple, and torches flickered along the battlements, casting long shadows. It was a night like any other, yet for Leora, the weight of her secret made her heart pound as if the world itself was pressing down on her chest. She carefully placed a silver tray on the counter, arranging golden pastries she had baked for the royal banquet. The scent of cinnamon and honey filled the kitchen, a small comfort in a life full of danger and hidden truths. Leora had served the royal family for many years, known as the chef who could satisfy even the king's strictest tastes. But no one knew the truth she hid, one that could change the kingdom forever. A soft cry came from the corner of the kitchen. Leora's hand instinctively went to the small bundle of blankets where her child slept. The baby's dark eyes blinked up at her, trusting and unaware of the world's dangers. Leora pressed a gentle kiss to the child's forehead. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. "No one can find you here." She remembered the night it all began. A year ago, she had met Kaelin, the Alpha King of Dravemire. Strong, fierce, and commanding, he was a man who ruled with authority that made even the bravest knights kneel. Leora had admired him from afar, never daring to imagine he could see her as anything more than the castle chef. But fate had its own plans. One night, under the pale light of the moon, their paths had crossed, and a moment of passion had changed everything. That night had left her with a gift and a burden that she now carried alone. The kitchen door creaked, and Leora froze. She quickly tucked the baby under a cloth and turned to see a young assistant carrying a basket of vegetables. "Evening, Leora," the boy said nervously. "The king's orders. He wants the first tasting of the new menu tonight." Leora nodded, hiding her tension behind a calm smile. "Tell him it will be ready shortly. Everything will be perfect." The boy left and Leora exhaled. Kaelin was unpredictable. He moved through the castle like a shadow, seeing things others could not. She had managed to hide her secret so far, but every day the risk grew. The banquet hall was grand, adorned with silver chandeliers, velvet banners, and carved wooden chairs lined in perfect order. Nobles and knights filled the room, their voices blending into a low hum of gossip and laughter. Leora entered with her tray, careful not to draw attention. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she steadied them as she placed the pastries on the main table. Kaelin sat at the head of the hall, his dark eyes scanning the room. He looked every bit the Alpha King, powerful, intimidating, and impossible to ignore. Yet tonight, when his gaze fell on Leora, something flickered in his expression. A spark of curiosity, of recognition that made her pulse quicken. "Ah, the chef," Kaelin said, his voice deep and commanding. "You have outdone yourself again. These pastries, they are perfect." Leora bowed her head, hiding the blush rising on her cheeks. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said softly. As the banquet continued, Leora moved through the hall, ensuring each dish was served with care. Nobles whispered compliments, unaware of the tension simmering beneath her calm exterior. Every glance from Kaelin sent a shiver through her. She could not let him suspect, could not let him see the secret she had carried for so long. After the feast, the guests departed, leaving the hall quiet except for the flicker of candlelight. Leora returned to the kitchen, exhausted but alert. She moved to check on her child, who slept soundly. She allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but the tension returned almost immediately. The weight of her secret was never far from her mind. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Leora turned sharply, her heart leaping. Kaelin stood there, his dark eyes fixed on her. The alpha presence of the king filled the room, and Leora felt a mixture of fear and longing. "Leora," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, "I need a word." She swallowed hard, keeping her voice steady. "Of course, Your Majesty." Kaelin stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "There is something unusual," he said slowly, "a detail I cannot explain. Something in the way you move through this castle. You act as though you know things that no one should." Leora's chest tightened. He was closer than ever, and his words pierced her like a knife. She had to think fast. I am careful, Your Majesty," she said, keeping her voice calm. "I have served this castle for many years. I know the kitchens, the halls, and the timing. It is my duty to move quickly and quietly." Kaelin's gaze softened slightly, but only a little. "Perhaps," he said, "but there is something else, something hidden." Leora's heart pounded in her chest. She had kept this secret for over a year, and now Kaelin's curiosity threatened everything. "Hidden?" she asked, feigning confusion. I do not understand." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "You are clever, Leora, too clever, and cleverness often hides truths." The words hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Leora's mind raced. Could he suspect the child? Could he know that the bloodline he had long forgotten had quietly grown within her care? She took a steadying breath. "I serve the castle, Your Majesty," she said firmly. "Nothing more." Kaelin studied her, the tension between them thick enough to touch. He was a man used to command, yet something about Leora made him hesitate. Something beyond curiosity, beyond suspicion. There was a pull, a connection he could not name. "You move as though you belong to these halls," Kaelin said finally. "And yet, you are not just a chef. You are hiding something." Leora's hands clenched the edges of her apron. She had always known this day might come, the day Kaelin would see through her carefully constructed walls. She forced a smile, hiding her fear. "Your Majesty, I assure you I am only a chef. Only a servant of the castle." Kaelin's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, and Leora's heart leapt. But then his expression hardened again, as if some internal struggle raged behind his eyes. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the sleeping child's blanket. Leora instinctively moved to shield the bundle, her heart racing. "Who carries the child in these halls?" Kaelin asked, his voice almost a whisper, yet filled with authority. Leora's breath caught. The words had escaped him, yet he did not see the full truth. She had to act quickly. "It is a child left in my care, Your Majesty," she said softly. "A child of the kingdom needing protection." Kaelin's eyes darkened, a mixture of suspicion and fury swirling within them. "And why was I not told?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "Why was this secret kept from me?" Leora bowed her head, hiding the tears threatening to spill. I could not," she whispered. "I feared for the child's safety. I feared for your safety as well." Kaelin's expression softened again, but only for a moment. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, the unspoken truths pressing down on them like the weight of the castle itself. Leora's mind raced with possibilities. Could she continue to hide the secret? Could she survive if he discovered the full truth? The sound of a distant bell echoed through the halls, marking the hour late into the night. Kaelin stepped back slightly, his gaze lingering on Leora. "Be careful, Leora," he said quietly. "Secrets in this castle have a way of surfacing, whether we wish them to or not." Leora swallowed hard, nodding. "I will, Your Majesty." Kaelin turned and left the kitchen, his presence fading but leaving a trail of tension behind. Leora exhaled shakily, her body trembling from the encounter. She looked down at her child, who stirred slightly in the blankets. She pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead, whispering, "We must be stronger than ever, little one. The king, he is closer than we imagined." As the castle settled into an uneasy quiet, Leora felt the weight of the coming days pressing down on her. Kaelin's words haunted her. Secrets have a way of surfacing. She knew that the time would come when the truth could no longer be hidden, and when it did, everything would change. Outside the kitchen window, the moon cast its pale light over the castle walls, as if warning her of the storms to come. The Alpha King had noticed something he could not yet name, and Leora knew, deep in her heart, that the moment of reckoning was drawing near. Her hand rested on the baby's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath her palm. She whispered a silent promise, one she had carried for months. "I will protect you. No matter what comes, I will protect you." And somewhere in the castle, in the shadows of the great hall, Kalen clenched a small charm in his hand, a charm he thought lost long ago. He stared at it, eyes wide with disbelief. The recognition was instant. The bloodline, the secret, the child, it was his. His jaw tightened. The quiet authority of the Alpha King faltered, replaced by a storm of curiosity, fear, and something deeper, something he could not yet name. His voice was barely audible as he whispered to the empty hall, "Who has dared hide this from me?" The air hung heavy with anticipation. The hidden truth was no longer entirely hidden, and the game between the Alpha King and the chef who had dared to protect his child had begun. The castle of Dravemire was quiet, yet its silence felt heavy, as if it held its breath for what was coming. Kalen walked through the grand halls, his fingers brushing along the cold stone walls. The charm he had found in the kitchen burned in his palm, a reminder of a secret kept from him for too long. The Alpha King, usually steady and commanding, felt a storm within, a mixture of anger, confusion, and something he could not yet name. He knew the charm belonged to his child, yet no one had spoken of the child. His eyes narrowed as he considered the possibilities. Who could have hidden this from him? And why? The more he thought, the more he realized that the answer must lie within the one person he had always trusted in small ways, the chef, Leora. Meanwhile, Leora moved quietly in the kitchens, preparing breakfast before the court awoke. Her hands worked with skill, chopping and stirring, but her mind was elsewhere. Kalen had noticed the charm. He had spoken words that lingered in her ears. Secrets have a way of surfacing. She had hoped that he might not connect the dots, but now the danger loomed closer than ever. She looked down at the child sleeping in the small cradle hidden behind the kitchen walls. The baby's dark eyes blinked open and Leora smiled softly. "You must be careful, little one," she whispered. "He is coming closer, and when he sees you, everything will change." A soft knock at the kitchen door made her start. One of the castle guards stepped inside, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesty wishes to see you," he said, though his eyes flicked briefly to the cradle. Leora's heart skipped a beat, but she hid her fear behind a calm mask. "I will be there shortly," she said, steadying her voice. Kalen waited in the royal library, a place where even the bravest knights dared not enter without permission. The walls were lined with books and scrolls, many containing knowledge of the kingdom's curses, prophecies, and ancient secrets. Kalen rarely had time to indulge in them, but tonight he needed answers. When Leora entered, she bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. Kalen's eyes studied her closely. "Leora," he said finally, "you know why I have summoned you." Leora's throat tightened. She nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Majesty, I am at your service." Kalen paced the room, his thoughts heavy. "I found this in the kitchen," he said, holding up the charm. "It belongs to my bloodline. Someone has hidden it from me. Tell me, Leora, who carries the child that is mine?" Leora's breath caught. She had anticipated this moment for months, yet now that it had arrived, fear gripped her. She knelt slightly, lowering her eyes. "Your Majesty, I did. I hid the child to protect it and to protect you." Kalen's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You hid my child?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "Do you know what you have done? You have defied me, and yet you risked your life for this child." Leora nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, I could not allow anyone to harm the child. I could not allow the kingdom to see it as a threat. You are the Alpha King. You would have been forced into decisions you did not want to make, and the child, it deserves to live safely." Kalen's jaw tightened, his pride wounded, yet beneath it, something softer began to stir. He looked at Leora, really looked at her, and saw the fear, the strength, and the love that radiated from her. He realized then that this woman, this chef, had risked everything for a life that belonged to him. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and rising tension. Finally, Kalen spoke, his voice quieter. "Bring the child to me," he said. Leora hesitated, then nodded. She walked to the hidden cradle and lifted the baby gently. The child gazed at Kaelin with wide, curious eyes, as if sensing something familiar. Leora handed the baby to him, and for a moment, Kaelin felt a rush of something he had never experienced before, an overwhelming connection, as if a part of himself had been missing all along. This is mine," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. The child's tiny fingers curled around his hand, and Kaelin's heart tightened with a mixture of awe and protectiveness. Leora watched him carefully, her own emotions a storm of fear, relief, and longing. She wanted to step forward to reach for him, but she knew the moment was fragile. Kaelin's mind was a mix of anger, confusion, and wonder, and any wrong move could shatter the delicate balance. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kaelin asked finally, his voice low and steady. "Why keep this secret?" Leora took a deep breath. "Because I feared for you," she said. "I feared that if the truth came out, the court, the nobles, everyone, they would see the child as a threat. And you would have been forced to choose between your crown and your child." Kaelin's expression softened, though his anger did not completely fade. He studied her face, noting the traces of fear and courage. "You risked your life for this child," he said finally. "And for me." Leora lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. "I had no choice," she whispered. "I could not abandon the child, I could not abandon you." Kaelin felt a shift within himself, a realization that he had underestimated her. She was more than a chef. She was strong, clever, and brave. And now, standing before him, she held the most precious thing in his life. The quiet of the library was broken by a sudden noise outside, the distant clatter of footsteps and the echo of voices. Someone had entered the castle's inner halls, moving with purpose. Kaelin's senses sharpened instantly. He held the child closer, his instincts as the Alpha King rising to the surface. "Stay here," he said to Leora, his tone firm but gentle. "I will handle this." Leora nodded, though worry twisted her stomach. She watched as Kaelin moved to the window, peering into the shadowed corridors. Figures moved in the darkness, cloaked and careful but not invisible. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. He recognized the signs of assassins, trained, dangerous, and drawn to the royal blood. The library became a quiet battlefield of strategy and tension. Kaelin whispered instructions to himself, planning a way to protect both the child and the chef who had risked everything. He knew that the coming days would test their strength, their trust, and the fragile bond forming between them. Later that night, Kaelin returned to the library, the child in his arms. Leora sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at him, and for a moment the anger and fear melted away, replaced by a strange intimacy neither had anticipated. "You are more than I imagined," Kaelin said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "You are strong, clever, and brave. I underestimated you." Leora's heart raced. "Your Majesty," she began, but Kaelin placed a finger gently against her lips. "Not now," he said. "We have bigger dangers ahead. But know this, I will protect this child, and I will protect you." Leora nodded, a mixture of relief and longing in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust him completely, but the castle walls had ears, and the shadows held secrets they could not yet see. The child stirred in Kaelin's arms, sensing the warmth and strength of the man who had once been distant and untouchable. Kaelin's heart tightened with a new determination. The Alpha King, who had ruled through fear and authority, now felt a new kind of power, the power of love, responsibility, and a bond that could not be broken. As dawn broke over the castle, the first light of morning spilling into the library, Kaelin looked at Leora and the child. The world outside was still dangerous, filled with whispers of curses, hidden plots, and royal intrigue. But for the first time, he felt hope. Together they could face whatever came next. And yet, even as the sunlight touched the stone walls, a shadow watched from the high towers. Someone had noticed the presence of the child, the shift in the Alpha King, and the quiet bravery of the chef. The observer's eyes glinted with anticipation, a silent promise that the trials for Kaelin, Leora, and the child were far from over. Leora moved closer to Kaelin, her heart full of questions and unspoken emotions. "What will we do now?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Kaelin held the child closer, his eyes dark and thoughtful. "We survive, we protect, and we trust, but not blindly. There are forces in this castle, in this kingdom, that will test us in ways we cannot yet imagine." Leora nodded, determination settling in her chest. "Then we face it together," she said. Kaelin's gaze softened, but his expression remained unreadable. "Together," he agreed. The castle remained quiet, yet tension lingered in the air. Whispers of prophecy, secrets, and hidden enemies wove through the corridors, promising that the peace they had found would be fleeting. The Alpha King, the chef, and the child had taken their first steps into a dangerous new reality, one that would challenge their hearts, their courage, and the bonds forming between them. The sun rose higher, casting its light on the stone towers, but the shadows remained, and with them the promise of trials yet to come. The castle of Dravemire had never felt heavier. The morning mist clung to the stone walls like a veil, hiding secrets and dangers alike. Kaelin moved silently through the corridors, the child held protectively in his arms. Leora followed closely, her hands steady, though her heart pounded with fear and anticipation. They knew that someone in the shadows had discovered the child's presence. Whispers of rebellion, of rival nobles seeking to use the baby for power, had reached Kaelin's ears. The kingdom had always been dangerous, but now the stakes were personal, urgent. The child was not just a symbol of hope, it was his bloodline, his legacy, and a reminder of the woman who had risked everything to protect it. Kaelin stopped at the main hall, eyes scanning every corner. The grand windows reflected the first light of dawn, illuminating dust and the faint traces of movement. "We cannot trust anyone," he said quietly. "Not the guards, not the servants, only each other." Leora nodded, her gaze fixed on him. "Then we stay together," she said. "No matter what comes." For the first time, Kaelin truly saw her, not just the chef, not just the woman who had hidden his child, but the brave, clever, and loyal person standing beside him. He felt a surge of emotion that mixed pride, gratitude, and something deeper, something he could not yet name. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the outer hall. Shadows moved against the light, figures cloaked in black, their intent clear. Assassins. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He had anticipated this, but the suddenness of it made his pulse quicken. "Leora," he said, his voice firm, "take the child and hide. I will hold them off." "No," Leora replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "We face this together. You are not alone." Kaelin's eyes softened, a rare smile touching his lips. "Together," he said, and they moved as one into the grand hall, the child safely secured against Leora's chest. The battle began quickly, silent but deadly. Cloaked figures lunged from the shadows, knives glinting in the morning light. Kaelin's movements were precise, controlled, and powerful, the Alpha King in full command. Leora, surprisingly agile, moved beside him, using clever tactics to protect the child and keep their attackers off balance. The clash was tense, almost like a dance, Kaelin's strength and skill complemented by Leora's cunning and quick thinking. Together, they fought not just for survival, but for the future of the child and the kingdom itself. One of the attackers lunged directly at the child, but Leora intercepted, her small but strong frame throwing the assailant off balance. Kaelin's eyes blazed as he struck down another, and the room became a whirlwind of shadows, strategy, and desperate courage. In the midst of the battle, Leora found herself cornered. A cloaked figure moved quickly, aiming for the child. Leora's heart stopped, but Kaelin was there in an instant, blocking the attack with sheer force. The figure fell, and Kaelin turned to Leora, his expression fierce and protective. "You cannot risk the child," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "Promise me, Leora." "I promise," she said, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, trust and understanding passed between them. They were no longer just king and chef, protector and secret keeper. They were partners, bound by danger, loyalty, and an unspoken bond that had grown through shared trials. The final attacker fell, cornered and defeated, and the grand hall returned to silence. Dust settled, and sunlight spilled across the stone floor. Kaelin held the child, looking down at the tiny face with a mixture of awe and wonder. Leora stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, and for a moment, all the fear and tension melted away. Kaelin's eyes met hers, and the unspoken words between them hung in the air. "You were right," he said softly. "The child must be protected. And you are more than I ever imagined." Leora's lips curved into a small smile, though her heart still raced. "We are stronger together," she said. "We always have been." Kaelin's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. He felt a warmth he had never known, a connection deeper than authority or duty. It was trust, respect, and something that could not be denied. In that moment, the Alpha King and the chef shared a quiet understanding, a bond forged in danger, secrecy, and shared courage. As the day progressed, they moved through the castle, ensuring that the child remained safe and that the attackers could not return. The nobles whispered, aware that something extraordinary had occurred, but none dared question the Alpha King or the chef who had proven themselves in the face of danger. In the evening, Kaelin and Leora stood on the highest tower, looking out over the kingdom. The sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson, painting the sky like a promise. The child slept peacefully between them, unaware of the battles fought and the dangers still lurking in the shadows. "We have survived this day," Kaelin said quietly, his arm around Leora's shoulders. "But the kingdom, the challenges, they will not end here." "I know," Leora replied, resting her head against his shoulder, "but we face them together, always." Kaelin's gaze softened, and for the first time he allowed himself to hope. The Alpha King, who had once ruled with authority and fear, now understood something deeper, the strength of love, trust, and unity. Leora had shown him that true power was not only in the throne or in command, but in courage, loyalty, and the willingness to protect what mattered most. Night fell over Dravemire, and the castle seemed to sigh with relief. For now the danger had passed, but the shadows remained, reminding them that their trials were not yet over. Yet, as Kaelin looked at Leora and the child, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would protect them, guide them, and stand by them, no matter what the future held. The bond between Kaelin and Leora had grown stronger through fire and fear, and now it was unbreakable. They had faced secrets, danger, and betrayal, and emerged not only alive but united. The Alpha King and the chef who had once hidden his child had discovered something more powerful than any crown: love, trust, and a shared destiny. In the quiet of the tower, as stars began to twinkle across the night sky, Kaelin held the child close. "We will face what comes next," he whispered, "and together we will rise above it." Leora smiled softly, her hand resting on his chest. "Together," she echoed. Yet even as peace settled over the castle, a shadow lingered at the edge of the kingdom, a figure cloaked in darkness, watching, waiting. Someone had seen the Alpha King with the child, someone who knew the value of the hidden bloodline. Their eyes glinted with anticipation, and a silent promise of future trials hung in the night air. Kaelin felt it too, a lingering sense that their journey was far from over. But for now, he allowed himself to savor the moment. He had found his child, uncovered the truth, and discovered the courage, strength, and heart of the woman who had risked everything to protect what was his. As the wind whispered through the tower, Kaelin and Leora stood together, the child nestled safely between them. They were no longer simply king and chef. They were a family, bound by trust, courage, and a love that had grown in the shadow of danger. The future remained uncertain, filled with trials, whispers, and challenges. But Kaelin knew one truth that would not change. With Leora by his side and the child in his arms, he could face anything. And the Alpha King would never let anyone threat what he now understood to be the most precious treasure in all of Dravemire, the family he had found in the most unexpected way. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting gold across the towers and halls, Kaelin whispered to Leora, "We have survived the darkness, and together we will face the light." Leora's eyes shone with determination and relief. "Together," she said, and in that word a promise was made, one of protection, courage, and love that could not be broken.